We dabbled with my money I had left in my account and I got dealt with that, so I've got rid of that on the system there.
Wonderful. Righty ho, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We'll now get back underway with this council meeting. We come to page 277, and this is the report on Council Mark. Saskia, you're going to take us through that. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, councillors. I'll take the paper as read. Just a few comments I'd like to make before we go to question and debate this item. First, I would like to acknowledge and thank you for the public forum, John and Jude, and their thoughts and comments on this matter. You all will know the staff recommendation is not to proceed with Council Mark at this time. We have not fully evaluated Council Mark in terms of its value to the organisation, but the recommendation really does send some concerns about reasons outlined in the paper. The process is really time intensive. The performance framework attached to it gives you a really good sense of the difficult questioning that goes into it. We've had some initial conversations with other councils, so they included Waitaki, Taupo and Central Hawke's Bay, and they've all expressed to us the effort that's required, not only from staff, but also from elected members and also members of the community. And one council has estimated it was near on 1,000 hours of time that this process took. So our concerns are definitely around staff workload. So we're currently carrying 17 vacancies in this organisation. That does exclude 7 recent appointments that have not been started. We're trying the hardest to absorb those vacancies within current workload. So it's pretty tough going on the staff at the moment. You all appreciate it's been a really busy year with the LCP. Staff have had to pivot COVID-19. And we're still working in an online environment, so about approximately half of staff at any one time, and obviously following the government guidelines there. And we are, as you're aware, in all the cases and staff we have with you, experiencing pretty high workloads. In addition to our BAU, that's ridiculous a little bit, we've got on our hands, as you're all aware, the Three Waters reform, the RMA reform, and of course the review into the future of local government. There's our honest opinion that a Council Mark review cannot be absorbed in the current baseline that we have. And the legal member's first decided to proceed with Council Mark is suggested by our presenter this morning, the option 2 around having a conversation around what we could stop or delay. So just a couple of comments on that, if I may. It would be pretty tough for us. There's not many places we can go to review, but obviously we would do that. We can bring it back to you. But things on the table for discussion would be things like stopping the New Zealand business work that's now underway, and obviously a real need in the community for that to occur. There will be sort of reduced response times to customer complaints. We may need to delay things like spatial planning, housing. We might need to look at our comms workload and have reduced comms. They're going to be pretty hard spaces in conversations for us to have, because so much of our work is driven by legislation and mandate. We can't just stop doing research and building work and then finance and council and sort of closing, I'd just like to say that we really believe, and I'm speaking on behalf of the team here as well, that organisational oversight is a really good thing. And council currently participate in many external audits, most of which go up to the Audit and Risk Committee. And these include audits such as the procedural and technical audits, environmental health audits, carbon emissions monitoring, cybersecurity audits, and we also participate in the voluntary free audit performance reporting. And that's very so with those comments, I'll take in
I just wondered if you knew which council had anticipated the 1,000-hour mark, if it was similar size to us or much bigger or smaller.
So that's one I always look at as being our nearest cousin in many ways. Sort of similar size, similar budgets.
And then another question, which probably was in the detail, but I just wondered, if the council signs up, then how much time have you got to start that process? Are there deadlines that need to be met, or is it like get us the stuff when you can type thing?
I haven't investigated it to that level. I would imagine though, and my advice would be if we sign up to it, we would want to then obviously start with it. You don't want to sign up for something and go, oh, let's do this in a year's time. Because LGNZ, looking at the assessors and the certain portfolio of materials you're offering and that kind of attachment that you need to provide. So I don't have the exact details on that. But yeah, my advice would be, if we're going to do it, you guys can do it.
Can we initially agree in principle that we believe this is a good idea and we lay on the table and reassess it when we are in a good position as far as those issues with staff workload and staff levels may be resolved sometime in the new year. So we give a strong message that we are keen to do this. I'll do it now because we're resource thin, but indicate we'll review that situation in say 3 months' time and relook at it.
So in 3 months' time, that was what takes us to about February, just to be mindful that, of course, we are going into your election, the local body election, and talking to a colleague I was with me, she was Timaru District Council, and obviously we don't have Council Mark here with us today, but from her she did say they don't involve election year, but we can obviously bring back further advice on that, but that's just one thing for you to throw on the mix as to how that would work for all of you as well for election year. Obviously in election year, we had extra demands on our governance team, and when we're looking across at resourcing, so we might make a decision like, okay, we won't do the investment work with it, I'll work on this. It's really hard from the likes of things like governance to bring in additional resourcing for Rebecca to contribute to the material required. So it really is something that will start impacting on sort of deliverables and workload across the whole organisation.
Nigel and then Tracy. Covered. Nigel and Tracy.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Mine's more a comment than a question. We sit around this table and we see at first hand pressure that staff is under and the workloads, and in a more general sense, when you look at the demands that have been put on this organisation by the rapidity of reform being driven by central government, Three Waters is the most immediate one, but there's reform to the RMA and looking at the future of local government in New Zealand, and those three streams of reform in themselves put enormous demands on staff for information and data and feedback, and that is just ongoing. And for me, the report and the recommendations there make complete sense. This organisation is just in no way in a position to consider doing this, and even the remark that it's generally accepted that you wouldn't want to embark on such an exercise in a local body election year just emphasises the fact that workloads just and resource just do not allow it. And subject to others' comments, I'm happy to remove those recommendations, to be a mover for those recommendations.
I'll just keep the conversation going, but I'll keep in mind you want to move on, Tracy.
Yeah, with respect, Nigel, I think we could always find an excuse or find something. We're never going to be short of work. And I fully respect that everyone's under pressure. However, it's one of those things that if we don't do it, are we going to be continually threatened and put into position? Now, I don't think we've got anything to be scared of or afraid of. And I don't know if we wait for 3 months or if we wait for a year, if there's ever going to be a good time as far as workload is concerned. Because there's, like you say, some stuff is coming out of central government that we don't know. So, yeah, I don't know. I would hate that it would just be discounted because of that.
Sure.
The flip side of it, after going through this, it may show us ways that we can work more efficiently or effectively or help the staff with their workloads to see how we can better help them the work done. So that there may be that doing this actually improves. I mean, the whole idea of doing it is that so the organisation is improved in some way so that we can look at ways that we can make it otherwise by the people who doing it. So presumably there are advantages. And it would be interesting to know what Waitaki have actually, what they've gained from going through the process, even though it's active. Interesting to know what benefits they've gained from doing it.
One of the things that sits in the back of my mind, and while I don't disagree with what Tracy's saying about we shouldn't be afraid of it, paraphrasing your words, Tracy, and one moment I'm not. I am really concerned, having watched what commitment and workload we're putting on our staff, and have been for some considerable time. It doesn't matter where it comes from, and even if we could resource it, it would cost money, but even if we could resource it, and we all know that the problems are actually trying to find people to do it, try and talk to Louise about anything on the planning team and try and get people in there at the moment. That's a big issue for us, and it's a huge risk. And I hate to think for a moment that this work became the straw that breaks the camel's back, because it could be. All of a sudden, you know, we're not striped by any stretch of the imagination, but you take some more key people out of an organisation, and it makes a huge, huge difference. I think I'm qualified to speak because I'm seeing it happen in another organisation I'm part of at the moment, and for all good and the right reasons. But that's not helpful on those that are left behind. What concerns me most about this is this morning that we heard from you and Don that there are some underlying issues that are motivating this, that they have chosen not to share. And I respect their choice, but it doesn't make this decision any easier because I don't know what it is that they want to actually achieve and what it is that's broken at the moment. They talk about transparency. Yep, I get that. But what is the transparency you want to fix? Because that's actually here and now and doesn't need council mark to fix. Doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do still, but if there are some here and now issues, then we should be confronting them. And I guess what I'm sure Don and Hugh are listening, so I would have liked to have known exactly what the issues are that are really motivating this. So I don't second guess it. That's not a good thing to do either. And it would help us probably better understand about why the need might be now or in the next 6 to 12 months or whatever the time frame is. Yeah, so that's what worries me about it all. That I'm hearing, and I don't disagree about the resourcing issue, the cost issue. I asked Hugh this morning about, you know, we said, well, we're probably going to we can pick it up in principle, then it's a matter of working out the cost, the timing, all those sort of things. But even then, to me, it's going to push it out because this pressure coming on our team from elsewhere is not going to go away. And I hate to think that this was a straw that broke the camel's back for some good, hard-working people in the meantime. And there's a fine line for the start too, because it could sound like a broken record saying, what is it you don't want us to do? That's a fair question. What is it you don't want to do? And it's not them or us trying to cop out. They're all things that are all relevant. So, you know, I'm a little bit betwixt and between, but in terms of going forward, we'll work out a resolution today in some way, shape or form. And I'm interested to hear what others say, but that's where I'm sort of looking at and trying to get a better handle on.
If we go back to the original email received that started this ball rolling back on the 28th of June from Hugh, the following points are worth mentioning, so I'm presuming this is the motivation. There has for several years been a feeling of discontent within our community as to how some council staff treat our residents. It appears that council staff are not accountable to a governing authority. It's not motivated by a single issue or complaint. I'm paraphrasing some of these. A number of residents didn't want to sign the request for fear of retribution. And I've been here 5 years, when I was on the Vincent Community Board, started back in, I can remember when. And I've heard those things for a long time from a small group of people. Frankly, here, like any organisation, when you've got 120 people and many, many moving parts, there's going to be times when people don't get the result they want. But generally, I found when people don't get the result they want, it's because what they want is not allowable under the Building Act or the resource consent process or whatever. People we're in a position where we often do annoy people through being a regulator. I think I think Kane, you asked for specific incidences that we might be able to look at, and you responded to that email, or was that actually a different one?
That was a
Previous one?
Yeah. And
No, got no reply. And that's what I find also in my role as mayor. I'll get told, oh, so-and-so said something about such and such. And I'm like, well, can people please give me the complaint when it happens so that I can deal with it? And generally speaking, once you boil it down, I had one just last week where somebody was complaining that planners had said something couldn't happen. It turned out it wasn't council planners. So it is frustrating when you have ethereal things like this, and we've got to look at the risks and the benefits. And I think, Neil, you've enunciated the risks very well, which I'm here every day and I see the stress. I'd like to be here at about 7:30. Sometimes I'm here at 7. I think there's been once or twice when I've been the first person here. People are trying to get on top of the workload. That's 17 vacancies. That's not an abnormal number over the last couple of years. I wouldn't think, releasing time. I mean, we've got a constant backlog of staff. And you can actually see that in our financial accounts. We were always so underspent in our staff budgets because there aren't people here. All that means is that the people we do have are way ahead. Their workloads are way ahead of them because they're doing work for somebody else. There's a couple of factors that we haven't mentioned. One is we still live in a very insecure environment in terms of COVID. We know COVID's going to be here, and I know people will say, well, COVID's an excuse for everything. But we don't know if we're all going to be working from home again when COVID gets here. It might be, depends on where we're at, the traffic lights and everything else. That's a factor. But the other factor is we could put the organisation under immense stress. The financial side of it's not a big picture, but the stress is. This organisation could be gone in 4 years' time.
Comment?
Good.
I agree with Rick, recommendation that Nigel made. There's enough pressure in the job now as it is, just doing business as usual. We are the elected members that should be getting the rev up from the public. In most cases, I think, take the issues, even the Three Waters, we are in the forefront of it. If they have a real major issue, have a go at the staff, have a go at the elected members. We just haven't got the resources and all the time. And if we're looking at burnout, I know it's a pretty tough environment out there. We don't need to put pressure on the staff to feel guilty because they're doing their job. There's in other parts of the community, there's a lot of people saying the council's done a magnificent job. So I think it's just going to be too hard on staff and too hard. It's hard enough being an elected member, let alone being staff fronting up with accusations all the time or pressure. We don't need any more pressure. It's a hard enough environment we're in now. So, I mean, we are being watched all the time. And Hugh and Don, you know, they have issues. A lot of people have got issues with various things about council. Doesn't mean to say every time that someone's not happy with parts of it, we've got to go and spend ratepayers' money for a red herring, to my way of thinking. Because the staff are doing as well as good a job as they can do in a very tough time. You know, look at the turnover and the churn of staff. If we want to encourage the churn, by all means put a review and put pressure on people and put the guilt, but I don't think it's needed. And you know, I'll stick in the Nigel's recommendation of option 1.
So we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion. I want to start that further discussion because I haven't sort of finished talking about the risks, the opportunities here, what's not in the report. We haven't heard directly from mayors or staff who have, what was the goods that came out of doing this report? Is it going to solve the problems that have sparked this enterprise? And that's a question that I can say I haven't yet talked to a mayor who hasn't been positive about the process and the end result. I want to put that on the table as well. Having said that, you know, once you have done something, we generally don't criticise it if you've invested all the time.
To that comment you were saying. The gentleman who brought this to the table has obviously got an issue with something, and that's something we don't know about. And I don't know whether this is the answer to that something. Maybe there was another forum that we could enter into with the proponents of Council Mark to resolve as you outlined in their initial email to us back in June of this year.
So let's take it away from that, though. The schools benefit from an ERO report. It's absolute pains in the backside from what I can gather, and they put a lot of pressure on people from what I can gather. Tracy, you're on the board of trustees, and others probably are too. Benefit from an ERO report?
You can do. Yep, you can do, and it's about what you choose to take out of it as well. So it depends on your mindset going in, actually. So if you go in with the negative mindset going into an ERO report, you're going to see everything as it being a direct attack on yourself. Whereas, generally speaking, you've got to remember, if we're using this forum, where that council might, what it will do is allow the community to see back in. But yes, you are right. ERO reports are they can be very painful, and they're long, and they've just recently changed too. So, but yeah.
Because this is, yes, Tony, please.
I would just acknowledge, and I guess as much to Hugh McIntyre and Don Sparks, that they are not the only ones who have raised their concerns about council or staff or governance or the way we operate in the community. But for every Hugh McIntyre and Don Sparks, I also had someone telling me what a great experience they've had with council, or how quickly they got their consents through, or how supportive they were in other regions. And I think we do need to weigh that up, because those people don't make as much noise when they're just happy with the service they received and move on with their lives. I agree with Tracy that some good could come out of this, and probably I would like to think that this is where we're going in the future, but I 100% agree with Neil that it is a lot of additional pressure to put on staff at this time, and that potentially would add many scores to a number of staff members who are also ratepayers, many of them. They don't operate in isolation, and I'd be worried about the impact on staff wellbeing if we ask them to do this now.
And your worship, I think that if you look at what Council Mark's actually about, and I've gone to the website just to make sure I got this right, it's a program designed to improve the public's knowledge of the work councils are doing in their communities and to support individual councils to further improve the service and value they provide. We've got more that piles on with that, incorporates an independent assessment, and we get an overall performance rating. There should be nothing in that scares any of us, or the council at all. But I think it is important to say, well, you can say, therefore, you look at that and go, well, if you think you're doing it all right, it's all very discretionary. It would be really useful to know, what are we getting so wrong, or not so wrong? What are we getting wrong in the eyes of people that have supported this move, that they actually think this is going to fix? Because I'd like to be sure that having embarked on the process, that what it is that is expected to get fixed is actually able to be covered. But if it's regulatory stuff, it's building code stuff, if it's RMA stuff, if it's government stuff, then it's a waste of time. And I think it's important to really know what is it that actually is perceived to be broken. Because you go through just finish our long-term plan process, not quite as many submissions as we got to our waste process. Here goes a council that I think is breaking new ground compared to a lot of the councils about telling and informing its community about what it is doing, and giving them the opportunity to be part of that process and tell us what they think. So I think it's, going, yeah, great to do, but right now the time is just crap. What is the issue? And it might mean it goes higher up in the priority list for all of us. Oh, hell, have you thought from that perspective? And that still to me says, right now, I don't doubt for a moment that it's got some values and we can learn a lot from it. Those that might have been around when we did systems thinking. Thank you, Mr. Kearney, Senior. But this council, the predecessor of this council struggled with that whole concept and the amount of money that was going to be done. But we knew what it was that was broken and wasn't working well. Some of the staff are still here. And we're probably as skeptical as anybody else was about what it was going to mean and the workload it was. But we knew what we were trying to fix. I'm still shooting in the space about, the fundamentals are right, but right now, to get at the top of my list, I need to understand better what the hell it is we're going to actually fix, look at fixing, looking at saying to the community, improve their knowledge on what we're doing. We've communicated it very, very well. What else what else are they missing?
So what I'm hearing is people think that in general, a review would be a good idea, but the cost of it and more about the impact on an organisation which is palpably struggling, as is every council in the country. People have to remember that the Three Waters, which we'll be discussing shortly, it's been the biggest thing I've ever dealt with as mayor, and that flows, what I'm dealing with will flow to staff, and that's on top of BAU, on top of LTPs, on top of growth, on top of COVID. And what I'm wondering with permission from the mover and the seconder, Nigel and Stu, is perhaps we pop in a D, we keep the motions we've got, but we put in a D that simply says we recognise the potential benefits to such a review, and then we have a agrees not to participate in this program at this point in time. But what I'm hearing about is it's where we're at the moment that's making this virtually impossible or undesirable. It may be in 12, 18 months time, once, you know, it could be by 2024 when the Three Waters has gone under the current plan and we've got a smaller organisation, that may be the time to do it, but now isn't the right time. Would you?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Is that amendment?
Yeah, Stu, you seconded it? There would be benefit.
But I don't know, by going through this process, there'd be no benefits in us having a workshop and and looking at ourselves. And not spending the money or doing anything else. Just, why don't we, that's what we do, we make decisions every day. Then why can't we just have a part of a workshop on us?
The issue is about what's going to come out the other side,
Yeah.
what's going to benefit what we're doing. And I'm really struggling.
Yeah.
And we know that we've just been through 2 years of hell with the long-term plan.
Yeah.
And why aren't we looking at the long-term plan? Well, the resource we put in there. So I'm not convinced that the outcome would be.
Will give us no better outcome.
With the cost. That's not, I'm not talking about the dollars, I'm talking about the stress it puts on the staff. You put up the words you suggested?
No, so it's deleted.
Things that undo.
It was something to say that we recognise the benefit of such a review. But
But it's not about doing anything, taking any action at this stage. That's why I didn't hear that, did I?
no, because D there now at the moment will remain. We're not doing it at this point.
Yeah.
But the option one that's been recommended agrees not to participate in council mark program at this current time.
Yeah, but the inclusion of D just provides some clarity around why we got there.
I believe that it could be valuable, but just we can't do it at the moment.
I don't think it changes the outcome. We don't.
At this
We're
current
not
time.
making any decision about
It's
that.
never going to be a good time.
No.
It agrees not to participate in council mark at this current time, period.
Louise.
I just want to say totally support transparency, and letting the community know what it is we're doing. There's been a few, comments about benefit and advantage of doing this. And I think the thing for us is we don't actually know what that is. So what we would want to do, if you wanted to go down that path in the future, is to first investigate that a little bit more fully to see if that's the method that we would use. And that will deliver the benefits you actually want, because there's a whole range of different ways of doing things. We do a number of audits and we learn from them, and we're assessed on the results of those. We have participated in an Australasian similar thing. I can't remember what it was called, Solvum, that took us. We resisted it for a while, but then we participated in it. It took us many, many hours, and it sounded excellent on paper. And by the time we got through it, we had flipped through and looked at the benchmarking and said, yep, we look pretty good. We'll get back to this and review it again, and we just moved on. So I think it's just totally support transparency and improvement, but just making sure we're involving ourselves in the right places.
So which argues to delete your suggestion because the persuading.
We've got a motion and a second there, and I've withdrawn that petition. So A, B, C, D has been moved by Nigel, seconded by Stu. Any further discussion? Neil,
Yeah, because I'm a bit reluctant to just be so, what's the word, at this time means nothing. It means it's gone and never to be brought up again. There's nothing to actually bring it back to the table.
I can share.
And that's what concerns me, because I think, the way the resolution is saying, at this time, well, Tracy's words are ringing in my ears. Well, no time's right, and she's right. So I think the finality of that
But that,
Could we,
I think we
Hang on.
show,
Bill,
I think we should show some, either take out the words at this time and make it very definitive. The answer is no. If we're going to say at this time, then give some indication as to what is the time. Because I think it's just a bit of a resolution. Sorry.
Or, and what Louise was saying, is this actually the right thing for us to do?
Nigel then Taylor.
I'd funnily enough argue the opposite to what Neil has just said. I think that if you read D to say agrees to not participate in this program, that's got a degree of finality about it. If you read it as it's written, agreed to not participate in this program at this point in time, that automatically implies that you will look at it at a future time, and at a future time, you would look at it, as Louise has pointed out, within the context of what other options to achieve the same thing. So I still remain happy with it as written. And maybe just to reinforce, I'll come back particularly to what are the people behind this wanting to achieve. And funny wee voice in me that says they're asking for transparency, but I'm getting transparency for them about what the concerns are. So that worry. So I think A, B, C, and D. I'm happy to stand by what is written there.
We're still discussing the motion. I'm saying it in Tracy.
I wouldn't mind having the opportunity to speak for us to do some work rather than asking staff to do some work, and for us to contact our counterpart at some of the councils that have participated. What was the result? Was it worth it? What change did you see? What benefits have elected members seen as being part of that? And then you could put a date, agrees to seek additional information and review again at X date, or
We can write this on the table to the December meeting. Well, not the December meeting, it's chocolate.
No.
You can lie it on the table until someone goes and asks those exact questions. And
Oh,
I know someone that could ask those questions, got a very good network that could actually go and say, well,
because at the moment we haven't got a lot in front of us about the benefits. We don't know really what the problem is. I'm going to go to Tracy, then I'm going to go to Ian, then I'm going to go to Steve. Tracy's forgotten.
Yeah.
Go to Ian.
And if we did that in that time, would it give us an opportunity to try and gain a better understanding of what the problem is as well?
Probably not.
Well, Chris could ask, is there a problem?
What harm
Is there a problem? Going back to the proponents of this and asking them directly to start engaging with us. They ask for transparency. They're not offering it themselves. If they've got an issue, why aren't they bringing it up?
They made it pretty clear when they initially asked for this to happen, what their problems were. They made it very clear. It was on the petition form, or whatever, I was told off using the word petition. Whatever you want to call it, forms, they were very clear what their beefs were. Tracy, have you remembered?
Yeah, on just a comment about going back and getting staff to do another report. I think that's to figure out if this is the best thing. I would personally prefer what Taylor was saying. I don't think we need to, it's either, getting another report and delaying it further is a waste of staff's time, but perhaps we could, do what Taylor suggested and go and do some more investigation as far as elected members.
What if because again, I come back to, we haven't got an argument that says the for. We know plainly the against. We can't weigh it at the moment. What if I were to go to, there's a range of councillors there, if I was to say to them is, here's what my councillors need to know based on today's discussion. How hard was it? What are the benefits? Would you do it again if today in particular, we're all under the same pressures we are. I can anonymise them so that they're not having to, perhaps that might be easier for them, and we bring it light on the table and bring it back to the January meeting. No further work for staff, which I think has merit. But we get I'm not saying the report's unbalanced at all, but we don't have that side of the equation because we know very plainly what the risks are in doing that. Do the benefits outweigh the risks? Don't know.
Right, so in that case, well, Nigel and Stu, with that course of action of lying it on the table, because otherwise I've got to put your motion, which if it's lost, doesn't harm us greatly, because we would simply go back to where we are, but it might be easier just to what do you feel about progressing that way, Nigel? You've moved the
I'm happy with the motion as it is, because nothing in that motion precludes course of action that you're outlined about seeking the benefits. Nothing precludes this council and council staff looking at what other options there are to achieve the kind of outcomes that Council Mark would do. And I don't think we need to tie future actions that we may want to take, such as you've suggested and Louise has suggested, to this motion as it sits. We've got a specific suggestion and we've got a recommendation, and I think it stands on its merits.
Neil, do you want to speak, Tamer?
Yeah, the only hiccup to that is that then this other work is done and Tim does what he's proposing to go and do, then another report has to be prepared to bring it back to us. Leaving it on the table says no more reports, no more staff time, no more nonsense with that sort of stuff, resource being wasted. We leave it live. That would be my reason for saying, let this have a chance to work through, and rather than actually cause more work.
I don't, because even if Tim comes back and says the best thing since sliced bread, and if Louise comes back and says yes, there are various programs out here, and this is as good as any, or better, or worse, or whatever, we'll still be facing a problem. We've got staff that are under-resourced and overstretched, and we won't be doing it. We've got to make an informed decision, mate.
Tamer?
I think just similar to Neil, if those recommendations are moved as they are, then anybody who's not been part of this conversation today or listening on the live stream and had to flick through the minutes at the end will look and, oh, all of that was passed. And I don't know that that would be particularly transparent, given what we've been discussing.
Okay, so here's where we're at. We've had a long conversation. We've got A, B, C and D still moved and seconded. I'm going to put that to the vote with the caveat that if the vote fails, that leaves us in no man's land and we have to start again, which I would be then moving that it lie on the table and might get the further information to the January meeting on the basis that my government secretary may have had some issues with, and she's reaching for the standing orders.
I don't know if you can hide an item on the table that's been lost.
No, you must go, if the recommendation's been lost, you can make new recommendations.
We have to make new recommendations. It's in limbo. Yeah. Right, so on that basis, Nigel's moved, Stu seconded, A, B, C and D. We're going to go by use of hands, just simply easier because I think it's going to be close. All those in favour, raise their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against, raise their hands. 6. Right, so that motion's failed. I'll now move another motion, and I'll do it slowly, Rebecca, so you can.
You didn't mean it like that,
I didn't realise you had a choice.
Right. A would remain, receives the report and accepts the level of significance. B would become that the mayor. A remains, receives the report, level of significance. B, the mayor brings to the January meeting information from other mayors as to benefits of participation, well, benefits or otherwise of participation in council, mate. And see that I don't need to see, do I? It already says it's incumbent in name. B. So just those two things. Sits on the table and I'll come back with word from other mayors, which I can put as a codicil to this report, because this report would come back. Do we have to put a C that this report comes back? C can be.
If I follow driven there's some requirements about reports providing full advice, and so we just need to make sure that the information that you here that might need an officer's view on it. That's the only thing I'm thinking.
I can certainly provide it to staff who can attach it to this report with comment.
I disagree that it requires an officer's view, the resolution that we propose is for the mayor to do something.
Yes, but it is on incumbent on officers then place options on those, so if the mayor brought some advice back, then there needs to be an officer's response to what the implications of that advice might have on the organisation. Does that make sense?
Just for the chair, because Mayor Tony comes back and says this is an absolutely wonderful thing to do. The reason I go away and do some work to go, actually there's other things we can do, I think, good. It may well, I mean, still in the resource issue there, aren't we? But there may be a different sort of staff viewpoint that we do bring back to that. I do like where you're getting with this resolution to go away and get some further information, but I do want more of a joint. Would that be a separate report or addendum to the report?
The idea was not to create more work on their staff.
We just had that option.
It's going to be, yeah, we just had that. To me, it would be pretty simple. This report comes back in January, accompanied by a report from me, and we're back to where we are. But nothing will have changed. Our staff situation will be better or worse by a degree of 1 or 2.
Through the chair, would you also be wanting advice on other ways that we could review organisational performance? The council mark is just one option.
No.
You wouldn't want as part of that consideration to go, we could look at this instead.
That's going to be a significant amount of work, wouldn't it? And for me, if I'm going to have a benchmark, it's going to be the benchmark that half the other councils in New Zealand have participated in. Because a report by Deloitte on how many times the phone gets answered and how many rings it takes and stuff like that, which is part of what I'm hearing is the problem, it's not a benchmark alongside council now. And I think anything procedurally, if A and B primarily, I come back to something else, it's going to be procedural whether that goes through staff or not, because you show me where it says that it has to, then it has to.
And if that pushes it out past the January meeting, then so be it. So I don't think it needs to be part of the resolution. It'll happen as good governance requires it to happen. Staff needs to do any report.
Yeah. Well, if it's not ready by January, we'll just poke it out.
Yeah.
All right. Someone want to second that? Thank you, Tamer. Any further discussion? Basically, we're coming back to this potentially in January with the plus side of it. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Against.
Against? Do you want that recorded?
No.
Sure. Ian?
Yes, please.
Yes, so 3 against to be recorded. Thank you. Not an easy discussion. I'm just comfortable with where that has wound up. Thank you, Saskia. As soon as I can find it, will take us to my report. So my report starts with talking about the 3 waters, but I'm going to turn it around and make that the last bit on my report. I've just noted there's been quite some ructions with inside local government New Zealand, with one council, Timaru district, leaving the organisation. Waimakariri has sought a special general meeting to withdraw the heads of agreement. Since then, there had been an informal meeting of the LGNZ to try to cleanse the air, and it didn't seem that Waimakariri push gained the support that it needed. Timaru remains out. And as I've noted here, Tony, you might want to comment the ructions within the organisation and just the pressure that elected members are under through the 3 waters was palpable at our Zone 5 and 6 meeting. District's vaccine numbers getting toward the 90% mark. Obviously that has to be a 90% within the Southern District Health Board to move into the traffic light. We've now reached 90%. Over 90% for first dose, and they reckon mid-November, 3rd week of November, we should reach 90%. So we would be, I think, the first district health board in the area that will move ourselves into the traffic light system.
Still quite a lag in the Teviot Valley, and there's been some discussions about how we can assist in getting the numbers up there, which was held yesterday with help from Stephen.
Stephen Needham.
Hmm?
Stephen Needham.
If Stephen and Ed, Stu doesn't know that.
I can give them.
Great to be in Clyde and see the transformations that we put in place in the 2018 LTP moving along very well. Lodge Lane looks fantastic, even though we're still waiting for some pavers and the new toilets to go in. People are very excited about that. Miners Lane's looking really good, and now that the tar seal's being able to put down on the roads, the whole town's starting to look good, and it's going to be absolutely marvellous. Just commenting, and Stephen might have an update, but over 37,000 journeys on the Clyde to Cromwell Trail.
Over 40.
Over 40.
My word.
And it's just absolutely outstanding. And it was interesting, back at that zone meeting, there was, I won't name names, but there was a mayor of a district in the South Island who you would think is a tourist destination, just saying how much they're screaming accommodations closing. This isn't Queenstown or Te Anau, one of the ones that you would know has been hurt by the international. This is national, and I think our trails are a lot of saving us at the moment from that effect, because it's really actually, as a councillor commented today, trying to get accommodation short term in Alex and Clyde proved almost impossible this week. So we've been very well served by the people who have put those trails in place. Martin and I visited Cambrians just to assist with the Three Waters, or the effect of the Water Services Act out there, and I'll be attending a community meeting in a couple of weeks alongside a lawyer, just to try to help them find their way through the morass. That is what's going to happen to small suppliers. Touched there on the concerns raised by some in the public about the data centre that's proposed at the Clyde Dam, and my strong view is that our role as administrator effectively of the Resource Management Act, and we don't have a role outside that. And I use the comparison of the vape shops. It's legal, and we've had somebody submitting today to us, and we've actually moved in the direction of banning vaping on our own properties, but we cannot do anything to stop vape shops opening. And people have said to me that shouldn't be allowed, and I'm like, well, get in line and tell it to the government. And coffee and chats around the district, extremely quiet. In 5 years of doing them, I've never known it to be so quiet. Either everyone's happy or they've given up talking to me. Okay, that's a point. To the rest. Which brings us to the Three Waters. So obviously last week, I don't think any of us was surprised. We hoped it wouldn't happen, but I don't think any of us was surprised that the government mandated the change to the Three Waters. And that has caused an extreme amount of, I'll use the word annoyance, but that's probably a bit low key. People feel betrayed. People in our community were expecting an opportunity, as we heard from our submitters to public forum today, to have their say in the biggest decision that local governments faced since the reforms of 30 years ago. And they feel that they've not been, well, they haven't been given that opportunity. It's as simple as that. And they want something to be done about that. There has been a move amongst a number of councils at LGNZ to form a coalition of the willing to take the government to court. I think the lesson of the futility in that sits 9 kilometres up the road at the Clyde Dam, when the landowners took the government to court, and the court said, you're right, we can't build the dam, and so they passed a law which said they could. I don't see the benefit in that at all. But for me, as I've put in my report, where do we go from here? Frustrating. There's no question that we cannot now go to our community and get their guidance on what we can do, because we have no choice. And there is a strong temptation to go, well, that's it, do what you want. Don't want a part of it, you know, because people are so upset about it. My view is still that, particularly the governance issues, which were of major concern to people, has got a working group set up and trying to influence that working group or whoever's on it in the direction that the community wants, which plainly is more community say in what happens to our assets once they no longer become under our direct control, is a big part of it. There's also a working group being appointed by DIA on the planning interface and on rural water schemes, but really I think the representation one is the big one. I'm also conscious that people have heard a lot from me on this subject. That's the role of the mayor, but they haven't had the opportunity to hear since the announcement's been made from other members of council. So I'm going to step back from my report and give everyone else a chance to have their 5 pennies worth. I'll go left to right. Stephen.
Okay, so for me, the big issue would be about the management model. We have to accept that there'll be no more status quo for sure, because there's some inadequacies in everybody's three water systems. Yeah, our water drinking water is well on the way to being achieved, or meeting the standard. But there's some other issues in the background that have to be addressed over time, particularly with the treatment of wastewater being down to freshwater, which is under up for So if we accept that the model, the current model doesn't work, we think about the future, which is probably what's been happening and what's caused us to be in the position we're in today. For me, the biggest issue I can see when you compare what's happened into Australia is the management model that they're proposing in New Zealand. I think is a heap of, it's flawed. It's flawed. It should be run, it should be commercially managed by professionals to get a result, as they've done in Australia. But what they're proposing in New Zealand, without going into it, I think it's wrong, and I don't believe it will get the results that they've achieved in Australia when we get 50% savings. And that's both on the operational side and the infrastructure side, but including the infrastructure. So they're my biggest concerns.
Like Stephen, I agree that things need to change so that we can all enjoy safe, clean water in our community. And I'm disappointed that the many hours that we've spent getting familiar with an extremely complex topic so that we can better consult with and engage with our community. And I think it's a real blow to democracy that our communities have not got that opportunity to say what they think is best for them. I don't think this one size fits all philosophy for New Zealand is necessarily the best, most appropriate action. And I think there's a lot of detail that needs to be worked through. I don't think it would hurt for us to still have a say in that, but I'm sceptical as to whether or not that is actually going to happen given this mandation. So yeah, incredibly frustrated for the community, and I understand the backlash.
Yeah, I mean, I share those concerns about the issues around standardised charging, around the governance model, and around costs generally. But the thing I'd really highlight today is disappointing it is that, in my view, the government has just not negotiated in good faith, and they promised consultation with the communities and then ignored that and took it away. They promised the ability to opt out of this process and then took that away. And worse than that, they just went over the head of local government direct to the public with an advertising campaign that was not designed to inform, but designed to influence people through emotion. And so they really treated, everyone accepts that the status quo is not an option, but they've chosen, I think, a flawed solution to it. And they're doing it at a speed which is almost guaranteed to cause some grief. So how much influence we can have through the next weeks with the working groups, and then thereafter in influencing the substantive detail, I don't know. We just have to hope that maybe there's some kind of reset and more government is more open to negotiating, and even more that we as a sector are better at negotiating, because I think we've done a very poor job so far.
Cheryl.
I don't disagree with a word that Nigel and Tamer and Stephen said. I think that's all correct. I've had my concerns all the way through. I don't like the governance model at all. I don't think it's there. It's not proportionally representative. I think a lot of their presumptions for the cost that it's going to cost our community is banked this 30 years $1,640 they're basing on a 30-year estimate, if you like, but there's so many presumptions made as to how they're going to get that, but yet they can't tell you what it's going to cost when we transfer the assets to them. They have no idea and have not answered that when they have been asked. So what is it going to cost our community up front initially? You know, they haven't answered it. There's so many questions that they haven't answered, and so much that they've still got to relay to the community. But it's been poor communication, and that raises an element of distrust. That's where I sit on this. Yeah.
Shirley?
I think we're in a situation now that none of us wanted to be in, but I think we're also fortunate for us in our community that we've got a very engaged community, and they tell us what they want and what they think when we ask them, and we're given that opportunity through the channels we thought, but I'm pretty sure our community is really going to let us know, particularly our rural communities, because I think that's where the most uncertainty around all this is. I think one of the big challenges we face going forward is to take that and see how much influence we can get on the advisory committee, and with your position hopefully coming to the fore, how much they actually have this outcome. So I think that's going to be one of our big challenges going forward. What's the selected members?
Frightened about where this will end up. There are many people agitating in communities right across this country who are angry about how this decision was made. I'm not surprised that it's been mandated. It doesn't matter what stripe of government you are, whether it's selling off SOEs or private or water reform. If the government has the majority, it can mandate what it chooses, and it has done so. And whether we'll be marching on the streets or not, we'll wait and see. But we're living in interesting times.
So the position that I see it is, at the moment, there is a massive lack of trust. And that lack of trust comes from a lack of information, a lack of clarity around issues that have been raised by this council in good faith during the process, which have not been answered, and a lack of appreciation that local knowledge and contribution has a value in this process, and most importantly, that a lack of consideration for our community's voice has been taken away.
Yeah, I'm really concerned that our community is angry and hurt, and they never had a chance to say. And we were silenced effectively of having that discussion with our communities open and honestly, and they've taken that right away from us. I think the modelling that they were presenting, I felt was flawed. There was always, to me, I remember having a meeting with Tracy one day saying, well, they're all going to mandate. That's the only way really they can. The dual governance worries me. It worries the community where we're in. We've been horribly let down, and yet we couldn't say what we really felt. There was never a place where we could express our views. And I'm even listening to the table today, it's pretty much 70 or 80% of this table would be in opposition, but yet the community I've been lined up saying, did you guys vote yes for it, you know, and it put a lot of pressure on the mayor because he basically fronted it. But it's really one of the biggest political things I've ever been involved with that's had a real impact on the community, and they're really hurting as a result of it, because, you know, Anzac Day reminds us all of a democratic right and freedom of speech and doing what we're doing, and I felt in this case it was taken away from us. So I'm really pissed off, and I feel like we as councillors have let down our community. We've really hurt them because they wanted us for guidance and we couldn't give them what they wanted because we never had the chance either. And that really worries me. And as a result of that, through all councils in New Zealand, there will be wonderful people that sit around this table going, why do we even bother? Because at the end of the day, we're just volunteers in a big spoke on a chain, on a wheel, you know. So it's really hurtful to see people with integrity and honesty that sit around this table that offer their communities wonderful some skill sets, we're all feeling really, really hurt and let down, and that's a terrible situation to be as elected member. And to the ratepayers, they probably, you know, that you can see why there's distrust in councils, and we've just had discussions about all that stuff, people getting angry and they're taking out us. We never had a chance to stick up for our ratepayers, and that's what really worries me. I'm really pissed off.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that with the centralisation of services, small areas might miss out. And there'll be a big focus on getting Dunedin and Christchurch up to speed, and the smaller areas could miss out there. And the system they're proposing adds layers of bureaucracy as well. So at the moment you have planning and Three Waters under the same roof. Now we might have planning here, and we could have Three Waters in Christchurch. So that immediately creates some inefficiencies just by having services in separate places. Some concerns around the governance model, particularly seeming to favour one group of people over others, and the fact that the focus has been on what councils have done wrong, rather than what the Ministry of Health had a big contribution to the system not being up to what it should have either.
Neil. Earlier today, we received an update on the RMA reforms plan, and we set a process that actually was quite inclusive. And more appropriately, we set an outcome that said we've listened to what you said and we actually changed and reflected that in the bill that's coming forward. And while the devil of that will be in the detail, the process was committed to and has been run. The fact that this community has not had the opportunities that it was, and I'm going to say promised, because I believe they were promised very, very clearly. Now I know politicians are really good at breaking promises. Those wise ones don't make promises because they're not that stupid. But the community is now trying to hold us to account for that, and to say that we're the ones that can do something about it. And I guess there's an analogy that, lots of analogies you can draw, but you know, Kama pulls me up because I might have had too much to drink and says you're over the limit. I said, I don't care, that doesn't apply to me. You know, that's what people are asking us to do though. They want us to tell the government that when they legislate, that just don't do it. Ignore them. And I'm not sure how to do that. So there's no promises being made in that respect. But the community's been underdone big time. Ian makes a really good point. The Ministry of Health have failed us for how long? And by us, I mean New Zealand. For how long? By not doing what they've been charged with doing. That means successive governments have failed us as well because they haven't made sure they've done what they're supposed to be doing. And the recent experience of COVID has probably showed us how important that sort of stuff is more than ever. So we've learned a hell of a lot. So it's great to sit back and throw stones if you didn't know what's happening in the first place. You know, the opportunity for us now to try and send a very clear message to the government about those feelings is there. But then how do you do it? And then what's it worth? You know, what's it going to actually achieve? You know, it is an unmitigated disaster in how to engage with communities and take them with you. There's a very clear solution to this, in my view. The status quo is not viable going forward. I don't think I've heard anybody disagree with that when they sit down and analyse the issues and know them for what they are. But that's no reason for undertaking the process that's being taken through now. So I just hope that we can maybe through this discussion today, we can find a way where we might be able to help our community express the frustrations that I think unanimously we are all hearing. And I really want to try and find a way that we can actually say, well, we've done what we can, best we can, to try and make sure those concerns have been passed on. And the rest will be whatever the system of government just determines. It's not good going fast. Oh, it's taken all the good stuff. Did a wonderful job.
Yeah. Wonderful job.
I know you're last.
No, look, plainly I've had the opportunity to say much more, and that's why it's great to hear from everyone else as we did at our last meeting. The way forward is difficult. I think I think we'd be in a position to write a letter to the government and perhaps publish it to the people of Central Otago to say that we know that we don't know because we haven't consulted, but I think we can be fairly certain that in general, the people of Central Otago are opposed to these reforms.
We know.
And do feel cheated by not being able to have their say in that through their council. I think we should go ahead and do that.
Totally.
Yeah, I'll support that.
And put a big half-page ad in the newspaper saying we're sorry.
We're not sorry, it's not our fault.
Well, no, but
We sympathise.
yeah. Because we would have been a good team to debate against the government for sticking up for our communities, and we never got that chance. Because we were silenced.
We heard this morning in the public forum from Jill and Janet. They're saying, please do something. So we know that that is the general feeling of the wider community, without a doubt. Most people wouldn't have a clue that their water's not flash. Actually, in most cases, it's quite good, to be honest. So the chance to let the community know that we've heard that through some sort of open letter or whatever we want to do it, I don't know how but is it an open letter to the community that or open letter to the government, which you then share with the community and say on their behalf, and then see what comes, because guess what, we're not going to be the only ones. There's 60 odd other local authorities doing something similar, and then you've got the groundswell stuff going on from the rural community. I think there's going to be maybe it's time for the urban community to do its own, similar thing for the Three Waters, or not.
Well, certainly our people didn't get to have their voices heard through us, through being able to opt in or opt out, but we can at least have their voices heard through the idea of an open letter to the government. So we'll get working on that.
I've been trying to find the letter from the email from the Taxpayers Union they sent, which some time ago, which showed the promises that have been broken. And for the first time, that saying that doesn't necessarily, I don't necessarily feel like what Taxpayers Union says it does. But for the first time, I could say you're not wrong.
Janet had a good line this morning. House of the people. We're in the house of the people.
Dead right.
We are the house of the people.
Oh, that's but nonetheless, we are the house of the people of Central. They can't come and visit us at the moment.
I look forward to your
For some of them, it might be a good thing.
skilled writing coming to the fore, you Richard.
Well, perhaps the leader of Three Waters and I can work out something together and circulate it and come to some agreement.
I might have to come from over with you.
No.
Oh, please.
No, I don't think that would be.
Make it a morning, because it's sharp in the mornings. He gets a bit tired in the afternoons.
That's for the sake of people watching his meeting and not me. Right, thanks for that, everybody. That was a very good discussion. I was going to say a good way forward. It's an inadequate way forward, but it's all we've actually got at this stage. I'll move my report.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Neil. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. I'm just going to check that we've done everything else, and I think we have. So we're going to move into non-public now for the reasons given in the agenda at page 461. So thank you to members of the public who have watched today via Zoom, Teams, whatever it is. 8 attendees. We don't know how many of them are staff, mind you. Grab yourself a small break while we change over systems and. I'll move we go to non-public, and Neil will second that, and all that in favour, aye. Against, carried.
I think to the portfolio, I don't know what I'm going to say. To the portfolio leads, I think we should actually say that we did a really good job of keeping to the timetable. The mayor didn't. Yeah, I was going to suggest.
Need speakers.
Good, that's the opportunity. Yeah, right. I'll share that with the
It's really hard.
Can you, sorry,